Last week, Elder McKay stood at a stake conference pulpit and talked about This Little Light of Mine.
A song with deep roots in Black religious and civil rights history.
He described it as a song where white people try to sing like Black people.
Then he told a story using African slave and Swanee River.
3 days later, he apologized in writing.
Today we're talking about what he said, why it was problematic, and why the apology is worth looking at carefully.
Hello, Eternal Family. Welcome to Post-Mormon Postmortems, Mormon Monday, where we talk about something of interest in Mormondom. I'm Jess.
And I'm Hannah. This week we are talking about Elder Kyle S. McKay, a General Authority 70, the church historian for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and RFM's former missionary companion from Japan.
I saw that.
who apologized after making racially offensive remarks at a state conference.
The stake conference was on Sunday, June 7th at the Yukon Oklahoma Stake. McKay opened by talking about a hymn. This Little Light of Mine was recently added to the church's new hymn book. He described it as a song where, quote, white people try to sing like Black people, end quote. Then he said, it is our hymn.
Then he told a story about a man in his ward's bishopric who sang the hymn while imitating stereotypical Black pronunciation. McKay said he wanted to tell the man, dude, you know you're white, right? According to McKay's story, the man answered, no, I'm an African slave is what I am. Then McKay added, I'm singing Swanee River.
He went on to say the new songs, quote, make you want to move, end quote, and that he was grateful that we can rejoice in our music.
That's the basic sequence. A hymn was introduced, race became a joke, slavery became part of the joke, Swanee River became part of the joke. I guess I just don't get the joke.
No, and it happened over the pulpit in stake conference by the church historian.
The hymn history matters here. This Little Light of Mine has debated origins, but because it's one of the songs associated with Black church life and the civil rights movement, that's kind of one of the accepted origin stories. Swanee River has a different lineage. It's also a song called Old Folks at Home. That's another name for it. Stephen Foster wrote it in 1851, and it was featured by Christie's Minstrels.
So McKay was not just referencing two old songs. He brought together a song associated with Black sacred and civil rights tradition, stereotyped pronunciation, slavery language, and a song connected to minstrelsy. That is why the remarks landed so badly.
Yeah, the problem wasn't that McKay mentioned race. It was how he mentioned race. He treated Black religious expression like a style white people imitate. He treated stereotypical pronunciation as, like, humorous, ? He brought slavery language into a chapel joke. He invoked Swanee River, which carries its own racial history of minstrelsy, as Jess said.
Mm-hmm. And then people online started doing what people always do after something like this happens. Debating intent.
Intent can be relevant. It doesn't decide the whole question. And plus, who can really say what someone's intent is? Often the person themselves can't. A person can intend humor and still say something racist. A person can be ignorant rather than malicious and still cause harm. A person can apologize sincerely and still reveal a larger problem.
But the church does not come to race as a neutral institution. Black men were barred from LDS priesthood ordination until 1978, and Black women and men were barred from temple ordinances tied to exaltation. The church's own Gospel Topics essay now disavows the old teachings that Black skin was a curse, that it reflected premortal unrighteousness, that interracial marriage was a sin, and that Black people were inferior.
Right, so McKay's statements, they have to be taken in that context. That's what makes it serious, that he is the church historian. His calling is to know and keep church history. So as one of the official stewards of the institution's memory, he kind of has an obligation to understand all of the context within which his comments are situated. When the church historian uses a civil rights era hymn as a setup for a joke involving a white man like imitating slavery language. The problem isn't just that one leader misspoke. It shows how easily Mormon spaces can still treat Black history as an accessory to white storytelling because of the way he
Indeed.
centered whiteness.
Yep. McKay did apologize, though.
He did, and that part matters too, because the apology is actually really unusual for a church leader that it happened, and it's unusually direct.
Right. Here is the full apology written to the stake president 3 days after the conference.
All right, read it straight through.
Dear President Mendenhall, at the beginning of my remarks this past Sunday in the Yukon Oklahoma Stake Conference, I made a poor attempt at humor around the singing of This Little Light of Mine. My words have caused offense and injury and put a blight on an otherwise wonderful weekend. I deeply regret saying what I said and apologize for pain, offense, or embarrassment that I have caused anyone in your stake or beyond. I pray that Jesus, who descended below all sin and error, will somehow help heal the wound I may have caused and in the process give me better vision and judgment. Please feel free to share this letter with anyone who might benefit from reading it. All the best. Elder Kyle S. McKay.
We were just talking about like apology language and the language of harm. I have to say, for a public statement from a leader, which if you're a Mormon leader, it tends to come not at all,
Right.
ever, or decades late, through a church spokesperson, softened with words like, we don't offer apologies. And so for this, to come within the same week, in the first person, signed, I don't know, it's different.
It is different. He calls his own words offense and injury.
Yeah, I'm just going back through it. He does apologize for pain and embarrassment, and asks that Jesus gives him better vision and judgment.
And then he asks for the letter to be shared with anyone who might benefit from reading it.
I mean, that's not what a man does when he is trying to make a thing publicly disappear. I guess it's up to the stake president to disseminate it for him. People misspeak from the pulpit. The repair in the LDS Church is the rare part. And he made it quickly and plainly. So in my book, he gets credit for that.
Well, and giving him credit for the apology does not require shrinking what happened.
That's exactly right. The apology is better than silence, and better than a spokesperson saying the remarks were taken out of context, and better than the church and TBMs pretending that everyone online is just overreacting.
Right. But the apology doesn't answer the whole question.
No, because the question isn't only, did Kyle S. McKay apologize? Because he did. The question is how those remarks felt so available to him in the first place.
Yeah, especially in that setting.
Yeah, because, I mean, stake conference isn't a private dinner or a conversation in a hallway with someone. It's recorded and broadcast worldwide. It's about as formal a church setting as it gets, and he was there as the visiting general authority, and you can just really feel for him as he realizes he's putting his foot in it.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling for him. But there is a very specific church standard that applies here. In January 2026, BYU Idaho President Alvin Meredith spoke about racism in a devotional. He quoted Dallin Oaks saying members must do better to root out racism. Then Meredith said doing better means more than avoiding hurtful words yourself. It means refusing to be silent when those words come from others. He specifically said that if students hear offensive racial language, even when it is framed as a joke, they should have the courage to speak up.
That is this situation exactly. Offensive racial language framed as a joke spoken by a church leader in a church setting. What are you to do?
Right, because by the church's own recent standard, members were right to speak up.
Actually, that's important because Mormon culture really trains people to never speak up against the leader. In fact, protect the leader first at all costs. You must defend what the leader says, justify, equivocate the statements, soften the harm, right? We see it all the time with how people will take them as blatantly offensive, racist, misogynist statement, and then question why are you objecting to it? Why are you so easily offended?
And that instinct protects authority. It does not protect the people who were harmed by the remark.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the audience in that state conference, but it's interesting to imagine, right, the gap between the official race statements that the church makes and the lived church culture. I'm wanting to know who was in that audience.
Yeah, it's interesting because the church wants to be seen as racially inclusive. It wants this global image, it wants diverse hymns, NAACP memberships, and they make these statements condemning racism. Those things are real. I'll give them credit for that.
They are. And careful public language doesn't change what people think and feel and say and privately laugh at or publicly laugh at or feel entitled to perform, or how they center themselves in the world and how others are viewed, like, from their perspective.
No, it doesn't. And this is all really context for the fact that older racial teachings shaped generations of Mormon culture.
Right. It's hard to imagine, just because the church has disavowed those teachings, have they, I mean, have
They've
they?
tried
Yeah,
through some very quiet means.
right. Just because the church has nominally disavowed those teachings, it doesn't erase the culture that produced them and they then subsequently produced, right? It doesn't just mean that leaders are going to understand Black religious history, because that's work that you would have to do. You have to learn to undo the instinct as a white person to center yourself, your whiteness, as like the default, that your experience is the default from which everything else is judged and othered.
Right. And if you look at McKay's remarks, white members were centered as the we.
Right. He goes, white people, we try to sing like Black people. And then he said, it's our hymn. So if you're a person of color in that audience, it's like, who's the we here, right? Like,
Right. I'm feeling excluded automatically. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's a revealing sequence from a leader who of a church that calls itself a global church, and he travels around the world, right? And served a mission in Japan.
So tone deaf. So the church added the song to its hymn book. And now the question is whether it can handle the song's history with any seriousness.
That's the work. I can't wait to see what happens next. If the church is going to bring Black sacred music into Mormon worship, then leaders need to learn what they are singing. They need to know that the music doesn't become contextless just because it appears in a correlated hymn book.
The church can't simply absorb the song and erase the people who carried it.
Exactly. This little light of mine, it doesn't become Mormon property just because they gave it a hymn number.
No. And that point feels especially important because McKay said, it is our hymn.
Hey, what is that about? It can be in the hymn book, it can be sung by Latter-day Saints, but it still came with a history before Mormonism touched it. You know that, right?
Yeah, well, the historian should know what it means to handle inherited history very carefully.
Well, again, that's why it's just so wild that he said it, because his job is to preserve Mormon documents and to model respect for the past.
So where does that leave us?
Okay, Kyle McKay said something racially offensive from the pulpit. He apologized quickly, personally, and more plainly than other church leaders often do. That apology deserves credit, but the remarks expose much deeper problems inside Mormon culture that obviously we already know.
Right. So the church has official statements condemning racism. It has disavowed old racist teachings. Somewhat. That's my opinion. It has leaders saying members should speak up when offensive racial language is framed as a joke.
And hey, look, now it has a lived example of why that council is needed, and you know what to do about it.
Right. So if you haven't got this point yet, this didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in a church with a documented racial past, a long habit of protecting authority, and a current desire to look diverse without fully confronting what older teachings and cultural habits have produced.
Yeah, that apology was very necessary, and the conversation is not going to end with the apology.
No. So that's Mormon Monday. Thanks for spending your time with us today. If this episode resonated with you, or even if it didn't, we would love to hear about it in the comments.
Exactly. The easiest way to help other people find us is to rate, review, recommend, or share wherever you are listening. We are so grateful for every single one of our listeners, and that means you, member of our eternal family.
It does. We read and reply to every single comment. We really love it. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Postmormon Postmortem, and of course online at postmormonpostmortem.com. And if you're listening to this on YouTube or Spotify, you can find us anywhere else where you find podcasts.
We will link to the Tribune Report, the LDS Daily Summary, and the church race materials in the show notes.
We'll be back next week with another Mormon Monday. Until then, Hannah, I'm so sorry for what I said when I was Mormon.
Jess, I am sorry for what I said when I was Mormon too.